On this occasion of our second anniversary, I shall go further in the examination of the meaning and import of our revolution by discussing the wider issues involved and the character and structure of the new society we are determined and committed to build. Our enemies and their foreign sponsors have deliberately sought by false and ill-motivated propaganda to becloud the real issues which caused and still determine the course and character of our struggle. They have sought in various ways to dismiss our struggle as a tribal conflict. They have attributed it to the mad adventure tourism of a fictitious power-seeking clique anxious to carve out an empire to rule, dominate, and exploit. But they have failed. Our cause is transparently just, and no amount of propaganda can detract from it. Our struggle has far-reaching significance. It is the latest recrudescence in our time of the age-old struggle of the black man for his full stature as man. We are the latest victims of a wicked collusion between the three traditional scourges of the black man: racism, Arab-Muslim expansionism, and white economic imperialism. Playing a subsidiary role is Bolshevik Russia, seeking for a place in the African sun. Our struggle is a total and vehement rejection of all those evils which blighted Nigeria, evils which were bound to lead to the disintegration of that ill-fated federation. Our struggle is not a mere resistance. That would be purely negative. It is a positive commitment to build a healthy, dynamic, and progressive state, such as would be the pride of black men the world over. For this reason, our struggle is a movement against racial prejudice, in particular, against that tendency to regard the black man as culturally, morally, spiritually, intellectually, and physically inferior to the other two major races of the world, the yellow and the white races. This belief in the innate inferiority of the Negro and that his proper place in the world is that of the servant of the other races has from early days colored the attitude of the outside world to Negro problems. It still does today. Not so long ago, the fashion was to question the humanity of the Negro. Some white theorists attributed the creation to the devil. Others even identified the devil as the first Negro. Later, they derived the Negro from the cursed progeny of Ham. Nearer to us, still in time, it became a topic for serious debate in learned circles in Europe whether the Negro was in fact a man, whether he had a soul, and if he had a soul, whether conversion to Christianity could make any difference to his spiritual condition and destination. By the 19th century, it had been reluctantly conceded that the Negro was in fact human, but a different kind of man. Certainly not the same kind of man as the white. Pseudo-intellectuals went to work to prove that the Negro was a different kind of man from the white. They uncovered the abundant so-called anthropological evidence from archaeology, which proved to them conclusively that the Negro was no more the same kind of man as a European than a rat was a rabbit. It is this myth about the Negro that still conditions the thinking and attitude of most white governments on all issues concerning Black Africa and the black man. It explains the double standards which they apply to present-day world problems. It explains their stand on the whole question of independence and basic human rights for the black peoples of the world. These myths explain the stand of many of the world governments and organizations on our present struggle. Our disagreement with the Nigerians arose in part from a conflict between two diametrically opposed conceptions of the end and purpose of the modern African state. It was, and still is, our firm conviction that a modern Negro African government, worth the trust placed in it by the people, must build a progressive state that ensures the reign of social and economic justice and of the rule of law. But the Nigerians, under the leadership of the Hausa Fulani feudal aristocracy, preferred anarchy and injustice. Since in the thinking of many white powers, a good, progressive, and efficient government is good only for whites, our view was considered dangerous and pernicious, a point of view which explains but does not justify the blind support which these powers have given to uphold the Nigerian ideal of a corrupt, decadent, putrefying society. To them, genocide is an appropriate answer to any group of black people who have the temerity to attempt to evolve their own social system. When the Nigerians violated our basic human rights and liberties, we decided, reluctantly but bravely, to found our own state, to exercise our inalienable right to self-determination as our only remaining hope for survival as a people. Yet, because we are black, we are denied by the white powers the exercise of this right, which they themselves have proclaimed inalienable. In our struggle, we have learnt that the right of self-determination is inalienable, but only to the white man. The right to self-determination was good for the Greeks in 1822, for the Belgians in 1830, and for the Central and Eastern Europeans and the Irish at the end of the First World War. Yet, it is not good for Biafrans because we are black. When blacks claim that right, they are warned against dangers trumped up by the imperialists, fragmentation and balkanization, as if the trouble with the Balkans is the result of the application of the principle of self-determination. Were the Balkans in a healthier place before they emerged from the ruins of the Ottoman Empire? Those who sustained the Ottoman Empire considered it a European necessity, for its Eastern European provinces stood as a buffer between two ambitious and mutually antagonistic empires, the Russian and the Austrian. For the peace and repose of Europe, it therefore became a major concern of European statesmen to preserve the integrity of that empire. But when it was discovered that Ottoman rule was not only corrupt, oppressive, and unprogressive, but also stubbornly irreformable, the happiness and well-being of its white populations came to be considered paramount. So, by 1918, the integrity of that ancient and sprawling empire had been sacrificed to the well-being of the Eastern Europeans. Fellow Biafrans, that was in the white world. But what do we find here in Negro Africa? The Federation of Nigeria is today as corrupt, as unprogressive, and as oppressive and irreformable as the Ottoman Empire was in Eastern Europe over a century ago. And in contrast, the Nigerian Federation, in the form it was constituted by the British, cannot by any stretch of imagination be considered an African necessity. Yet, we are being forced to sacrifice our very existence as a people to the integrity of that ramshackle creation that has no justification either in history or in the freely expressed wishes of the people. What other reason for this can there be than the fact that we are black. In 1966, 50,000 Biafrans, men, women, and children, were massacred in cold blood in Nigeria. Since July 6, 1967, hundreds of Biafrans have been killed daily by shelling, bombing, strafing, and starvation, advised, organized, and supervised by Anglo-Saxon Britain. None of these atrocities has raised enough stir in many European capitals, but on the few occasions when a single white man died in Africa, even where he was a convicted bandit, like the notorious case in the Congo, all the diplomatic chancelleries of the world have been astir. The whole world has been shaken to its very foundations by the din of protest against the alleged atrocity and by the clamor for vengeance. This was the case when the Nigerian vandals turned their British-supplied rifles on white Red Cross workers in Okigwe. Recently, this has been the case with the reported disappearance of some white oil technicians in the Republic of Benin. But when we are massacred in thousands, nobody cares because we are black. Fellow countrymen and women, the fact is that in spite of their open protestations to the contrary, the white peoples of the world are still far from accepting that what is good for them can also be good for blacks. The day they make this basic concession, that day will the non-Anglo-Saxon nations tell Britain to her face that she is guilty of genocide against us. That day will they call a halt to this monstrous war. Because the black man is considered inferior and servile to the white, he must accept his political, social, and economic system and ideologies ready-made from Europe, America, or the Soviet Union. Within the confines of his nation, he must accept a federation or confederation or unitary government if federation or confederation or unitary government suits the interests of his white masters. He must accept inept and unimaginative leadership because the contrary would hurt the interests of the master race. He must accept economic exploitation by alien commercial firms and companies because the whites benefit from it. Beyond the confines of his state, he must accept regional and continental organizations which provide a front for the manipulation of the imperialist powers. Organizations which are therefore unable to respond to African problems in a truly African manner. For Africans to show a true independence is to ask for anathemization and total liquidation. The Biafran struggle is, on another plane, a resistance to the Arab-Muslim expansionism, which has menaced and ravaged the African continent for 12 centuries. As early as the first quarter of the 7th century, the Arabs, a people from the Near East, evolved Islam, not just as a religion, but as a cover for their insatiable territorial ambitions. By the 10th century, they had overrun and occupied, among other places, Egypt and North Africa. Had they stopped there, we would not today be faced with the wicked and unholy collusion we are fighting against. On the contrary, they cast their hungry and envious eyes across the Sahara on to the land of the Negroes. Our Biafran ancestors remain immune from the Islamic contagion. From the middle years of the last century, Christianity was established in our land. In this way, we came to be predominantly Christian people. We came to stand out as a non-Muslim island in a raging Islamic sea. Throughout the period of the ill-fated Nigerian experiment, the Muslims hoped to infiltrate Biafra by peaceful means and quiet propaganda, but failed. Then the late Ahmadu Bello, the Sardauna of Sokoto, tried, by political and economic blackmail and terrorism to convert Biafrans settled in northern Nigeria to Islam. His hope was that these Biafrans on dispersion would then carry Islam to Biafra, and by so doing, give the religion political control of the area. The crisis, which agitated the so-called independent Nigeria from 1962, gave these aggressive proselytizers the chance to try converting us by force. It is now evident why the fanatic Arab Muslim states like Algeria, Egypt, and the Sudan have come out openly and massively to support and aid Nigeria in her present war of genocide against us. These states see militant Arabism as a powerful instrument for attaining power in the world. Biafra is one of the few African states untainted by Islam. Therefore, to militant Arabism, Biafra is a stumbling block to their plan for controlling the whole continent. This control is fast becoming manifest in the Organization of African Unity. On the question of the Middle East, the Sudanese crisis, and the war between Nigeria and Biafra, militant Arabism has succeeded in imposing its point of view through blackmail and bluster. It has threatened African leaders and governments with inciting their Muslim minorities to rebellion if the governments adopted an independent line on these questions. In this way, an OAU that has not felt itself able to discuss the genocide in the Sudan and Biafra, an OAU that has again and again advertised its ineptitude as a peacemaker, has rushed into open condemnation of Israel over the Middle East dispute. Indeed, in recent times, by its performance, the OAU might well be an organization of Arab unity.